Okay, hello everyone. Today we're going to be talking about the ethics of enhancement, and this is a area of research interest to me. So I hope you'll also find it pretty interesting. And if you want to talk more about this, just let me know. So one of the main people that works on enhancement and that is in a lot of visible contact, especially with the public, is Michael Sandel. So he's a political philosopher. UB does a lot of political philosophy here. So it's pretty well heard of. And he was on the President's Commission for Bioethics, so he's had a lot of policy impact as well. And he's a proponent of communitarianism, and we won't really get into that too much, but it is a pretty interesting position. A bit controversial nowadays, especially. So he's critical of enhancement, and we're getting to the reasons why. And one of the main things to talk about with enhancement is the difference between treatment and enhancement. So, on the one hand, we have something like you're having a heart attack, and we treat you for that heart attack, and you're all better. And enhancement is more like um, giving you drugs that will make your heart healthy enough to not have a heart attack. Doesn't have to be preventative exactly, but it usually is on that side of the equation. And they typically have the feature of improving the, uh, in this case, the heart beyond what is the normal range for people, especially for the people who is getting the enhancement. So this is why it kind of makes a interesting case because on the one hand, we have this idea of it's totally fine to treat people. No one has any objections to that. But in cases where we're going beyond treatment, you might wonder if this is something that might distort either human nature or our relationship to our children. So this is one of the main concerns that I just said. Human nature is what this technology kind of questions. And the reason this is important is because in the past, people object to, say, something like communism because humans are not as benevolent as communism assumes. And if that's the case, then we have a reason to reject communism. But if we can change human nature, we have less of a reason to think that that is something we should believe, because if humans are changeable, malleable in their traits through genetic enhancement, then we might come to think that since communism seems to be a more moral system, maybe we should start to transfer towards that system by enhancing everyone. Um, just skip this one. So Sandel mostly rejects the autonomy concern. So the autonomy concern is that if you're enhancing your offspring, which is one of the ways that enhancement is talked about, there's no opting in to the enhancement. The parents are just doing it. And it's objectionable because there is no consent, there's no autonomy on the enhanced individual. And so, but Sandel doesn't think this is a good objection to genetic enhancement fully because it can't explain our hesitation towards people who enhance themselves. So in the article you guys read, they talk about muscle enhancement, memory enhancement, growth hormones, reproductive technologies, and these all are cases of parental enhancement. And people object to genetic enhanced athletes because it seems unfair, right? That someone would be able to simply change their genes and get a better advantage without some kind of work put in, right? So the sprinter is, when they win, it's thought that, well, they put in the effort so they deserve it. But in this case, we're genetically altering the genetic makeup, and that is helping them win. So the question is this necessarily unfair? Because we have to also control for the fact that there's just genetic differences between people, and this, in large part, seems to be what makes the difference in a lot of competition. Not necessarily all of it, right? But there's certainly people that are more endowed in certain kinds of sports than others. And when they win, we don't really have any problem with it. We mostly just praise them and observe their talent, right? So one problem is that doctors give human growth hormones not only to those with deficient amounts, but just people who are short. So this seems to be a case where we don't really care about enhancement. We really care about the outcomes, right? Because if someone doesn't have defective growth hormone, then but they're still short, we might think that enhancing their hormones might make their height average. So in one kind of trait, we're okay with enhancing if it leads to a more average distribution in the child's height, right? Um, so this is a kind of problem with thinking that the treatment enhancement distinction is morally relevant because we make a lot of decisions already that doesn't consider it, right? We're going to skip this slide. So some people object that genetic enhancement undermines humanity by threatening our capacity to act freely and to succeed in our own efforts and to consider ourselves responsible. We'll be getting into this last part fairly soon. He doesn't. So Sandel specifically thinks that doesn't think the real problem is the erosion of human agency, but a kind of hyper agency. If you've seen the movie Prometheus, this is the main alien race in the show. That was their kind of downfall, and this is Prometheus from the Greek myth that stole the fire from humanity. So this kind of arrogance in creating oneself is going to be what is problematic for Sandel. So this drive to mastery misses, it may even destroy the appreciation of the gifted character of human powers. So this attitude of giftedness is part of religion, but it doesn't necessarily have to be, because it seems to resonate a bit beyond religious concerns. So to kind of view life as a gift and to view your children's traits as a gift is going to probably be more consistent with human flourishing, is the argument, than viewing them as something that you are responsible for and something that you can, in fact, change. So this recognition that the gifts in our life are not our own is in itself a gift for Sandel, so to speak. So on the angle of sports, so it's supposed to be this willfulness and biological power that arrays against the claims of giftedness can be illustrated by our attitudes to sports. So Sandel points out part of what we admire in athletes is their gifts, not entirely, and we particularly appreciate people who are not exceptionally gifted but are very hardworking. So there's some examples. Pete Rose, so he's kind of a very dedicated worker and addicted gambler. But then there's the naturally gifted that aren't particularly hardworking, like Joe DiMaggio. So these are good examples of two different cases where one person's just gifted, one person's hardworking. We tend to think that the hardworking person is more deserving of their wins and a better player, perhaps. Maybe not in the sense of playing the game, but in the spirit of the game, maybe. So the problem with drugs is that one wins by shortcut. It isn't that one wins by shortcut. So the effort isn't the goal, the excellence is. And the effort is not always rewarded. So people are sometimes bad at sports, but they try very hard. So no one wants to really see bad basketball players that work very hard. They want to see Michael Jordan, who obviously works hard, but is also very gifted. So problem is exactly that it corrupts athletic competition as a human activity that honors this kind of cultivation and display of natural talents. So to wrap up the slide. So it can kind of be seen as an ultimate expression, the ethic of effort, this effort to be excellent in sports. So it's kind of like looks maxing or whatever that is trying to maximize a certain kind of trait uh, to whatever cost. So on the children's side of the argument, to appreciate the child as a gift is exactly what I was talking about 2 slides ago, where we're imagining that we're open to a wide range of possible traits and outcomes with our kids, and we don't fiddle too much with it. They're not the instruments of our own will and ambition. They're their own autonomous agent, right? And William May has a very good um, idea of parenthood as a being open to the unbidden. So being open or accepting of the unbidden, which is just things that you haven't willed but yourself. It's things that are the effect of chance or something that you had no control over. So Sandel says that even if parents didn't act despotically, the disposition deprives the parent of humility and large human sympathies that an openness to the unbidding can cultivate. So this is the helicopter parenting. Imagine that turned up to the max, where parents are just trying to get their kids into law school or whatever you name it, and trying to maximize those kinds of traits that maybe they wished they had in their life, but they don't. And this can kind of compromise the child's autonomy. So there's these 2 kinds of versions of love is that May brings up is the discussion of is accepting versus transforming love. So the former affirms the child, the latter seeks to the child's well-being. So the one is outcome-based, the other is accepting the child as they are. So ambitious parents are carried away by transforming love. This may manifest itself in the overscheduled, overtutored, and overcoached, or in a wish for genetic engineering. So an example is in Breaking Bad, if you've seen the show. His parents are the kind of parents who don't accept Jesse. They have this kind of transforming love, which loves him for the person he could be, not for the person he is. So they love him not as an addict, not as a basically a high school dropout. They love him as someone who is more academically perhaps talented than he is, gifted, and they don't love him as he is, which is the problem. And the other character, Jane, is a perfect example of having a parent that has accepting love. He has this large drive to, and in the end, we find out that it's a correct drive of wanting Jane to get off drugs, to go to rehab, and this, transforming love pushes him to be pretty pushy with his daughter. But in the end, he does step off and accept Jane for who she is, and he loves her as that. And these are just great kind of characterizations of what May is talking about. So Jesse's parents have a distance between them. Jesse never really loves them so much. He actually loves probably more for wrong reasons, but this idea of that you can want something so bad for someone that you can push them away from you is exactly what Sandel is talking about with enhancement. So having more ways to impose your will on your child might make room for more types of this kind of transformative love to come out and to make parental relationships worse. So if you've seen Gattaca, this is another example where the kind of like genetic worry runs away. So if we're in a social world where mastery, control is a value, so then we might see that genetic engineering is a way to affect that through our children. And this would be something that is not open to the unbidden. So remember, Jesse's parents weren't, open to Jesse running through hard times. They wanted him to do well for himself, but this overfocus on his well-being prevented them from fully accepting him and loving him, and in turn, Jesse loving them. So this kind of "I love you who you are" attitude is exactly what genetic engineering for Sandel is going to be compromising. So it doesn't threaten responsibility as much as give us too much. So don't misunderstand this. So we become blameworthy for things that we used to not be blameworthy for, like our genes. So if you're religious, you might see yourself as a kind of gift from God, your body as a gift from God, and you might be relieving to not see yourself as responsible for your genes or who you are. Maybe cathartic, right? So this gets into secular areas as well, though, because if we're responsible for a large proportion of our genes or our biological makeup, let's say, to be more broad about it, then we might be able to, go back to the heart case. If you can afford, heart enhancements that make your heart much healthy to the point that maybe you live for 150 years without a heart attack, you might not see the point to subscribe to heart insurance if there's such a thing, right? Usually it's just medical insurance, right? But you see my point. If you're very able to avoid a lot of the biological problems plaguing most people, you probably don't see a point to enroll in health insurance, and this sets you apart in a morally relevant way from the rest of the society. So health insurance work because people don't know when they're going to have this kind of illness. And this is a collective kind of problem where insurance markets are only collectively advantageous if people don't know or control their own risk factors. If they do control their risk factors significantly enough, they'll know whether or not opting into the insurance will cost them money or be a benefit. And this begins to make private insurance very problematic because it becomes very expensive when only the sick people who know what their risks are enrolling, and the healthy people are staying away. So in this way, we wouldn't be able to get private health insurance off the ground because the healthy are not willing to subsidize the sick because they're not buying the insurance because they know they don't need it because they won't have a heart attack, for instance. So this gets into other potential problems with enhancement, which is that if you are responsible for your biological makeup, you might not feel obligated to help the less fortunate. So if you paid for a genetic enhancement that prevents you from having a heart attack, you might not feel that you need to enroll in insurance. Or if you, paid for a genetic enhancement that makes you more money conscious, let's say, probably don't feel obligated to spend money to help out the poor who can't eat. So whatever it is, right? If you're more fortunate, it seems like you usually don't. And I think this comes out in surveys where you ask people who are particularly wealthy if they think that individual responsibility or government action is more needed to prevent poverty. Rich people, surprisingly enough, think that personal responsibility is more important because they do begin to not support these social safety nets when they are so far away from ever needing it, right? It just increases their taxes, right? So the sense of luck involved in our gifts saves a meritocratic society from sliding into kind of this assumption that the rich are rich because, they're more deserving than the poor. So if we're not responsible for our biology, so if we don't do genetic engineering, the rich can always, oh, I was just, genetically, biologically gifted, and that's why I should subsidize healthcare. That's why I should be okay with taxes. But if everyone is more likely to be able to control those factors, then it seems like it's a personal responsibility and not kind of a collective responsibility, right? So then we might not think we need health insurance, for instance, to subsidize it or support it with taxes, right? So if we had perfect genetic control, we wouldn't really have any solidarity that arises, Sandel says, right? This is all Sandel, not me, right? When people reflect upon the contingency of their talents and fortunes. So he concludes that the promise of mastery of nature is flawed because it threatens to banish this appreciation of life as a gift and leaves us with nothing to affirm or behold outside of our own will. Pretty, prosy and powerful, right? But basically, he sees this idea of enhancement as just making us more responsible for stuff that perhaps we shouldn't be. So we will get into some objections here. And a lot of people object to a lot of people object to Sandel, one of them being Francis Calm. So Calm is going to disagree with Sandel on the main problems of genetic enhancement, but still think that there is a problem with genetic enhancement. So her problems is the desire of control over offspring in nature are problematic. She disagrees with Sandel that the desire to control offspring in nature and being unwilling to accept the unbidden are actually problems. So where Sandel focuses mostly on the morality of character, Calm distinguishes the kind of character traits that are causing the action and the motives for certain kinds of enhancements from the morality of the action itself. So there's going to be like the things that dispose the person to act, the character traits, but then there's going to be the outcome. And Calm is pretty being mostly a utilitarian, I believe, not convinced that this argument works because it might be the case that on average enhancement makes people better off. And whether or not the character traits are good or bad, we can still question whether or not the outcome itself makes it better for the status quo, despite perhaps making people worse at the character level. So she doesn't really agree that the parent-child relationships need to be corrupted by enhancement, or that they will threaten solidarity and justice. So think of a case where someone is doing a good deed, but that good deed is being done for bad reasons. We can still say that the good deed, say someone's helping an old lady across the street, classic example, right? They might be doing that because they know that someone's going to try to run them over and they want the old lady to prevent them from being hit first by the car. Now, say there is no car that hits them and they make it across the street. Good action, done for the wrong reasons. Maybe an extreme example, but Calm doesn't think that we should judge enhancement alone by the character of the people using it, right? This might be appealing if you're a utilitarian. So also on the chopping block for Calm is the idea of defending the treatment enhancement distinction. She doesn't think it's a very wise decision. So medical intervention to Sandel defends the fact that medical intervention to cure or prevent illness does not desecrate nature but honors it. So he's saying that there is a difference between treatment and enhancement. But Calm is very confused by this because so why do we appreciate think back to the case of the short toddler, right? Why do we care that the hormones are being enhanced, but the height is returning to something that's closer to normal? Why should we appreciate nature's gifts, limiting ourselves? so we can appreciate what is given, but supplement it and make it something that's more suited for what we want in the world. So also, Calm doesn't like this kind of distinction between transforming love and accepting love. Well, she doesn't like the treatment and enhancement distinction. So we have, on the one hand, the treatment enhancement distinction that Sandel is using, but then on the other hand, we have the idea that there's the problem with enhancement is transformative love versus accepting love. And it's not clear how these work together, right? Because we could imagine that there's going to be cases for both sides, and if what's really wrong, if what Sandel is saying is that in the case of parental enhancement, the problem is that the parents are not having enough accepting love, we can say that without saying anything about whether or not the treatment is a treatment or an enhancement. So that seems pretty problematic, especially because it seems like Sandel wants to have both. It's just really not clear how these work together, and we could, in fact, imagine them being pretty freestanding and not really informing one another, right? So it's a good practice to use a distinction to separate out two kinds of cases, but then say that one case is good or bad for some intrinsic reason. And it's not clear that he's doing it here because we could imagine a case where we have parents are treating a child, let's say, but it is kind of against their will, right? Maybe they don't want to be treated, or they think that it's just better off for them to not be treated, right? In that case, the parents might jeopardize the relationship between each other by trying to coerce the child to get treatment. And notice that this might fall prey to the distinction between transformative and accepting love and compromise the relationship, but it's not the case. It's not a case of enhancement. So we might wonder whether or not this distinction between treatment or enhancement is really doing anything for Sandel. Yeah, we basically covered that. So Com agrees that with Sandel that children are not products to be designed, but still thinks that design is compatible with concern and respect. So she points out that it isn't considered wrong to redesign oneself to replace knees, teeth, hips, nor does she think that replacements better than originals are wrong, and I don't think most people do. I mean, if you need a knee replacement, do you want to get a biologically normal knee, or do you want to get a much better knee? Let me know after you've had a knee replacement, and we can talk. So suppose we were designed by others, we'd still be, beings of worth and entitled to respect. Nothing about being created by another person and designed by another person is really inconsistent with their personhood. So Com doesn't really think that this is why genetic enhancement's wrong. So Com points out that parents getting more control over their child's makeup doesn't really mean that they have less control. So still chance that is going to determine a lot. So there's going to be some proportion, no matter how small, that is going to be chance, like environmental chance or biological chance, that designs children if parents don't. So there's still going to be this spontaneous randomness to the child's upbringing that is not due to the parent. And why can't we be open to that amount of unbiddenness, right? And further, we might think that respect for persons demands that we enhance people's capacity for willpower. So if you have little self-control, you might find it enhancing of your autonomy for your parents to enhance your self-control to make you more autonomous, right? So the social justice stuff, Com doesn't really think that we don't have duties to other people even if we're responsible for a biological makeup. So, so she kind of illustrates this with blame without being responsible for consequences, with our duty to help persons who are severely injured. So we still have, you know, reasons to help people, even if we're more responsible for our biology in the end, is Com's argument against Sandel. Uh, and lastly, this is the kind of utilitarian argument, which is that isn't there just going to be less people in need of help under the enhancement regime if they can, prevent heart attacks, prevent, uh, you know, uh, lack of self-control, et cetera, et cetera. And that seems to be true, right? Okay, so to kind of wrap up these objections, her main objection is that are not Sandel's about the appropriate nature of enhancement or the distinction of enhancement versus treatment. She's worried that we couldn't safely alter people, so she also wonders why we should do so given our scarce financial and medical resources. Seems to be a lot better things to do with our money, right? Deeper issue is the Com's really cool kind of point is that uh, we generally have pretty bad imaginations with what will make us better off. So if we all could actually control our children's genes, we might do something very boring. I mean, look at Netflix. There's a lot of shows on there that are aimed at the average audience, and the average audience usually likes pretty boring things, right? So if we would give control of people to have this kind of influence on the population's genetics, Com's worry is that everything will just be much more boring and we'll have less social goods because of it. Because we actually are very bad at predicting what is going to be socially beneficial. So her argument is just let nature sort it out, right? It's doing way better than us anyway, and what we'll do is going to be more boring and give us less goods that we care about. Because we generally don't know usually what is a fortuitous conjunction of genes or even social arrangements, right? We were wrong about communism, for instance, right? So we're pretty surprised, at the kind of great range of incredible diversity of traits that people have that combine in a way that are just, fabulous, right? Wouldn't have thought of it beforehand, but they're there in the world doing something that everyone appreciates. And if we would have designed it, we wouldn't have had those people, right? So who would imagine that shyness or reservedness is going to be something that is socially beneficial or interesting to people? Probably no one, right? So her conclusion is like, what's wrong with genetic enhancement? Well, we suck at it. That's the answer. So the number of combinations in the wild, let's say, is just going to beat us hands down every time uh, compared to conscious control of the genes. And that's why we shouldn't do it. Okay, that is a wrap here. I will talk to you guys probably in 2 weeks or something like that. So, yeah, have a good rest of your week.